Greetings, brothers and sisters. Okay, so this is a rare audio I'm going to put up on my three channels to do with the spiritual side of my content here. This will be a separate video that'll be up on the Gratefullness meditation channel, and then my backup channel, which I cover things, and also in my journey series, the 153rd journey series, because it's kind of a big deal. I had a conversation with this guy, Mr. L, which I was a little concerned about because of what he messaged me, that maybe he just, was back in the fold with Doooji or whatever it was. Which I don't, people have to make their own choice, and it's a difficult whatever's going on. But in a sense of, it doesn't bother me that people make these choices. But it would be a little bit of a bummer because he was the only one who was kind of a little bit of a, was a truther in his way, right? But anyways, we had a good conversation, and he told me three things that I think that are important to the narrative that some resolution or information that makes sense, and, maybe I would speculate about, but I had no way of verifying it. And so he talked to some guy who was a preceptor, like someone, so he's been doing this meditation for probably around the same time I have. I don't know when he started, maybe even before I started, so 30 years or whatever. So he was talking to an Indian preceptor about, like, he wanted to go to the ashram in Ohio and see if the energy there was good, because of the conversations we had and whatever, and he hadn't been there in a while. And he found the energy was still good there. And I was like, yeah, maybe that's just because, maybe the ashram, I don't know what the spiritual condition is there. I don't know what people are receiving or not in these sittings, because it could be coming directly to them, but bypassing Doooji. Like, there's no way to verify it. There's no way to figure that out. But anyways, he talked to the guy saying, he had doubts about the system because of Doooji. And the guy said, why? Because of Phil? And the guy thought I knew Phil. I think he said Phil, but it's a name I didn't know. But there's somebody else out there that's saying bad things either about Doooji or the ashram or whatever it is, right? But anyways, so the guy eventually said, Mr. L said, the guy asked him, was they talking about, like, the whole whatever's going on here. And he said, Mr. L said to the guy, I'm just meditating on Chariji's form. And it's not something I want to get into here, but meditating on the form of the master is, a thing. It's like a whole thing. And it's not really for anybody doing Gratefullness or anything like this. And, I mean, people who had some kind of relationship with Chariji and happened automatically. Chariji, used to meditate on the form of Babaji. And then it becomes something else, too. So it goes from a visual image to something else. But anyways, like, again, this is not for the practice or whatever. There's a reason for it. Babaji addressed it years ago. And so it's a stage in your meditation. But he said he was doing this. And the guy said, yeah, lots of people are. So there are lots of people now who are meditating on Chariji's form who are freaked out about what Doooji's doing. Because that would be the only... he was not the living master Chariji. Like, people don't meditate on Babaji's form and things like this. There's no benefit to, meditating on the non-living master. It's not part of the thing. So they are not acknowledging Doooji as a master. And the guy's saying lots of people are doing that, meaning there's lots of people that know that Doooji sucks. And so that's, which it had to be. And like I said to the guy, Mr. L, I'm like, there's no blueprint to deal with what we're dealing with here, with Doooji being the way he is. But the conversation happened because I remembered this guy, Mr. L, because, what happened with the Olympic opening ceremony and how much it was, there's all this deviant sexual kind of, stuff going on in the opening ceremony, demonic stuff, and, And this guy had a conversation with Chariji, and this guy was more on the conservative side. Chariji was extremely conservative. And so, well, before that, this guy talked to Mrs. J's wife. Mr. J is kind of a prominent person. Mrs. J is a prominent person as well. And this guy doesn't like Mr. J, but he was, you know, he had a good relationship with Mrs. J. And they talked about me a little bit. This is a conversation from a while ago that this guy told me. But he added something that Mrs. J said, that they were trying to censor and back away from Chariji's talks. And she said from a certain period. Like what happened was Babaji told Chariji that he had failed the mission, that Babaji had failed the mission by being too soft and permissive. And he had all these guys who were boomer hippies that came in from Europe and America, and they broke away from their religion, which is a good thing. And they were seeking spirituality, which is a good thing. But they were into the free love, free sex, free drugs. And the mission was like a mess in these countries, right? They were using LSD. I mean, Babaji had to clean up all these people's mess when they contaminated their spiritual condition by using LSD and even smoking pot and drinking alcohol, which are not allowed in the system, right? Something that's, I guess if you'd have to take pain medicine before an operation, something like that. But, in terms of recreational drugs, no, right? And my preceptor had told me that he went to gatherings in Europe where they were handing out alcoholic beverages, like drinking beers at the gatherings, like is unthinkable now. But years ago, that's what's happening. And Babaji had said, only forbidden is forbidden, which made these liberals with, their freedom of indulgence think that you could do anything, and that wasn't the case. And so the mission had a lack of discipline. And once Babaji had allowed stuff, he didn't want to add the sin of disobeying the master to their already gross, bad decisions they were making. But it was a mess. And so he told Chariji he had to come in and impose discipline. And Chariji started to talk about things the liberals didn't like. And he separated men from women in satsang, and they called him a male chauvinist pig. And, eventually they kind of realized he was right to whatever extent, but they never got rid of their liberal views. And so he gave these talks on like gay marriage and other things, very conservative points of view, and unique in their way. They're not, just mimicking Christian conservatives' points of view, not prejudicial, but the spiritual effects of this modern day sort of, what we're seeing now. And towards the end of his life, 2011, 12, he gave these brutal talks, just brutal, very conservative talks. And I think the liberals were all freaked out by it. And so they all want to make those talks disappear. And I think they were happy with Doooji doing that, right? So she made reference to that. And then the guy had a realization in our conversation. And he said that when he talked to Chariji, and Chariji said all the things that are happening now since 2015, 16 with the gender stuff and all these other things, that he told him this was going to happen. He told this guy, Mr. L, this was going to happen. And Mr. L said, Kamlesh was there at the talk, and I could tell that he was not happy with me and what Chariji was saying, and he felt like it was about him, that the future master of the system was, not happy with him as a person, and maybe he was too conservative or whatever. But now he realizes from our conversation that, like, Kamlesh was bummed because Kamlesh was not happy with what Chariji was saying. Because, I played him the clip where, what happened was in 2016 at Babaji's birthday, Doooji says we're going to decentralize the bandaras, the gatherings. And they came back to America on Chariji's birthday on the 23rd of July, the day before Chariji's birthday. He gives this talk saying, I don't want the qualities of the master. I want to transcend the master. And then he says, the master will be happy if you say, boss, I have become greater than you. And he was saying that about Chariji. And so now he kind of realized that Doooji was upset that Chariji was saying these things that we all know to be true, and the degradation of the system. So these were kind of big reveals, that in this conversation, because this guy was then ostracized by his preceptor for having this conversation. Like, nobody wanted these questions to be asked to Chariji, and nobody wanted the answers that Chariji gave. And he was, you know, towards the end of his life where he just didn't give an F anymore. He was just saying things that were like brutal, like, you know, hard talks. And of course, the liberals are moving away from that. The other thing the guy said was at the ashram, they were giving away Chariji books, like just putting them on a table and giving them away to anybody who wanted them. And he said, "Why are you doing that?" He said, "Well, we have so many of them and they're not selling." And I'm like, you know, what if? Why are they not selling? Right? I know Doooji's books aren't selling. Like Doooji's books are available for nothing on like eBay and, you know, I mean Amazon, whatever. They're used books because nobody likes the crappy books. You know, they just released another version of The Heartfulness Way, and you know, The Heartfulness Way is a book that Doooji wrote or was written for conversations that he gave. He was not the author. Joshua Powell was the. He was, you know, one of his. He went to Doooji as a preceptor, Kamish as a preceptor, and he took down notes of what Kamish was telling him as a preceptor long before he was this so-called, you know, was appointed master of the system, even before he was nominated as master. And so this is years and years ago when Kamish was in America. He was in India for 7 years before Chariji died. So the conversations took place. Maybe some of them took place, you know, more recently because, you know, they were in India together. But I don't know exactly the context of the conversations, but none of the conversations were about when Kamish was the master. So they were pre-master talks. So it wasn't like he was even made into the master yet. And it's not like great, you know, because he had his own opinions, and his opinions different from Chariji. He thought he knew more than Chariji. And Kamish is very conservative. That's the weird thing. You know, he's embraced the RSS and these Hindu conservative, you know, Diaper Baba's conservative, and Bodhi's conservative, and they're very pro-Hindu. And they're against these, you know, deviant sexual behaviors. And, you know, all of it. But he's not saying those things because he just doesn't want people to be pushed away. Like he's trying to be, you know, he's not liberal. And so, like, he's just not saying the things that need to be said because he's running a scam and he's not creating discipline in an organization. I believe that there's just no discipline anymore. People are just running amok, believing or doing whatever they want without any sense of, you know, moral discipline and spiritual discipline. And yet people are freaked out by what he's doing, and that Chariji is, you know, they're thinking Chariji's still the master. They're still clinging to that. But he's not, right? Chariji, you know, that's the problem. Chariji appointed Doooji, appointed Kamish. And, you know, we talked a little bit about that and how, like, there was just no real choices. And, you know, what, I mean, he really didn't have any options, you know, because of the people around him and just what happened with the previous guy. So there's a number of problems with what's happened because there's all this emphasis put on the importance of a living master. And the fact that Chariji legally and, you know, on video made Doooji his successor. So like that, as much on Chariji as anybody else, right? Because you can't, you know, Doooji didn't, I mean, he might have stolen this thing away according to the Doooji truther, that there was pressure put on Chariji to appoint one of these inner circle douchebags, but, you know, whatever that is. This is the guy who's legitimately the master of the system, and there's no solution. There's no way to get rid of him. You know, like I say, just can't conjure up a master, right? Like there's no spiritual work has to be done by the previous master to make the guy into, you know, someone with that level of spiritual approach, and there's training that needs to go on, right? Babaji was trained by Lalaji, and Chariji was trained by Babaji. And so, and Doooji was trained by Chariji, and so there should have been some, you know, but his complete failure. And, you know, it was easy, like my son said, he just had to kind of continue on what Chariji was doing. But he's completely broken from him, and his teachings are often opposite of what Babaji and Chariji have said, and Lalaji. So he's broken away from their whole, I mean, all of it. And the, you know, the spiritual discipline, and, you know, how watered down the system is, and people see it and they're freaked out. They're Chariji people, but they don't know what to do because they're sheeple. And a lot of them just aren't paying attention to what's going on. You know, so that just kind of makes sense. And I, you know, I mean, I don't feel good about, you know, I mean, being a sheeple is not something I respect. obviously, but more importantly than that, they're not listening. They're the way that they're conducting themselves. But there's no blueprint for it. That's the only thing I can say. Like nobody knows what to do, like me included. Nobody knows what to do about this thing, and the energy's still there. You can still feel the transmission and the cleaning. The system is still there, but like there's no organization to implement all these things. And so the gratefulness meditation is great. It's something, but it's not an organization, right? It's a YouTube channel, right? It's a YouTube channel with some sitting videos on there, and some of you guys are like, I saw the comments, and you guys are enjoying it. That's great. And so, I just posted a video about how I had this wonderful satsang yesterday, and and I talked about the whole, I was having, I don't want to say doubts, but just it's there's not moving forward, and I can't, I don't have the energy and time to do anything about it, and I don't have any sort of a blueprint, right? And it'd be great if there are people who were like good abhyasis before, who participated in gatherings, people who may be previous preceptors under Chariji, and who would be part of this thing or something, right? Like there could be some kind of thing that's just acknowledges Doooji's fall and then all these other things. But I don't know how to make that happen. Like I'm not a community builder, and I don't think the people, I think a lot of them understand that I'm completely right, but they don't like the way I've gone about this or whatever it is. And if they're not listening to Doooji, they're not going to listen to me, right? They're not going to, some of them might be just compelled by this stuff because of the issues they're having, but they won't even admit it to themselves. That's the issue. Like that's the problem with sheeple. They won't admit to themselves that Doooji's fallen. Like they'll kind of, whatever it is, because there was a number of people, I was saying this to Mr. L, enough people had gone to the powers that be or Doooji himself and questioned his not talking about Chariji, that he gave that awful talk, saying that he was prepared by Babaji behind Chariji's back in secret, and that he slammed Chariji when he was announcing Chariji's final resting place, which was a small corner of a little gazebo in an ashram that's been sort of deprived of resources. Chariji's, have the former headquarters of the system. There people have been, all of these things. And so, the people they're dealing with whatever they can and the way they can, given their background, their culture. And the liberal people are glad to see Chariji gone because of, the things that he said that were against their belief system. And so, it's just, it's kind of just, like I said, a sad thing. Like it just has died. Without Chariji, they haven't been able to keep up that level of performance, and he was carrying everybody spiritually, and people were just going behind him, following him in some way without producing much effort in themselves, and they couldn't draw that to that energy and that the whatever was going on, the condition of the mission that was here before. There's no continuity to it. It's just that's just dead. The way it was is dead, and what Doooji's brought in is a joke. And they're like, they're either sticking their head in the sand or I don't think people even watch him, and, they just pretend that it's not happening, or they just are doing whatever they're doing, right? Which is, meditating on Chariji's form or something, some form of that, but not acknowledging that there's been a huge problem here. like there's it's off the rails, the organization. So anyways, so it was a good talk in terms of all this information that came to me. The thing that there's lots of people who have a problem with it. They didn't like Chariji's, the things that he was saying that were considered conservative, and, and there was all these interactions. This guy had a few of them. And so there's a whole thing that happened, right? There was, like on multiple levels where they, they've just allowed Chariji to be thrown under the bus, which is like really unthinkable. Ultimately, they've betrayed the guy. Like, there's thousands of Judases, basically. That's what it comes down to, that they'd allow Chariji to be treated in this way, and they would go along with it without verbalizing any objection. And I'm sure there's some objections, because obviously Doooji had to answer some questions about his not talking about Chariji. And, but it's way worse than that. And, the whole thing's falling apart. I guess they sold the ashram in Georgia, Molina. So, it's all kind of completed. The whole, they've erased his books, and, they've deprived or either sold some of these properties and things that he built. And they're now just, doing this wellness crap. And like I said, it's ultra conservative and, kind of racist. The RSS is an anti-Muslim organization that Doooji's partner with. Doooji keeps on, heading towards the conservative end of things, but he doesn't make these talks or say these things that need to be said that allow the liberals. And if he does, they're not even paying attention to him. So, but he doesn't, so like it's, it's just like everybody doing what they want instead of following the teachings and the discipline of the system, and the energy and the cleaning aren't there anymore. And Chariji isn't there to clean up the mess. So that's where we are as in terms of all of it. That's where they are. Like I'm, free from it because we're doing the Gratefulness meditation. And, it allowed me to feel like, not allowed me, but brought to my attention that, it's better what we're doing, at least for me personally. Like I'm happy with the gratefulness. I'm grateful for gratefulness and being disconnected from all that mess, and that the energy's still there, that my meditations are better, and, than they were under heartfulness. And, there's still that connection without having to deal with this mess. And, because I just don't want to see it anymore. Like I have an aversion to the heartfulness YouTube channel. I can't even watch Doooji anymore. I have zero interest in it. And, I'm just not, other than some things come up once in a while. I'm not going to talk about it, right? Because we all know what it is. I mean, people who do gratefulness already have given up on Doooji and heartfulness, right? And so, it's just, after I made that decision and, not decision, when I had that, when Doooji said he was going to combine the gatherings, and then I felt the energy at Lology's Basant gathering 2023 without the videos from Doooji, and I felt a direct connection. I'm like, wow, this is so much better than it was under the heartfulness debacle. So all that, this is all of it, right? So yeah, let me just wrap this up. But like it's some resolution here, because I didn't know. I mean, I guess I know to some extent because I knew people were questioning Doooji not talking about Chariji, and I know that there's a Doooji truther and all that stuff. But as far as these people who are devoted to Chariji, there's still some devotion there, but not enough to stand up for him, right? Enough to want to have a connection with him through their meditation, but not enough to speak up for him and to condemn what the failed disciple Doooji's doing. So anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.